Hello and welcome to another tips and tricks video, this time for Avowed. Now, this game has got a little bit of controversy right now, but I think if you kind of get into it, it can be fun. That's why I kind of thought these tips and tricks would be appropriate, as it kind of made it so myself is enjoying the game a little bit more. But let's jump right into it. Tip number one is don't be scared of your dodge button. I don't know why, but I was kind of perusing around the subreddit, which is it's kind of a mess right now. But a lot of people are saying that the combat at certain points in the game, especially the beginning, can be super hard. And I will admit, as someone who likes the painful type of games and gameplay in general, that this game's beginning combat can be a little rough. Now, I mean, obviously I'm showing you the first boss fight. This is literally 30 minutes in the game. This is no spoilers. And the first thing they tell you is to use your dodge button. And I can't reiterate that enough, that using your dodge button will save your life. Don't be content to stand there and just spam spells standing still. It will get you killed. I know it's hard to follow what the game says every once in a while, and I agree. I don't want to dodge. I want to stand there and beat their butts up, beat their asses. But use your dodge button. It'll save your life. I promise. I really promise. For tip number two, and this is more so, I think, a general kind of... It's a general kind of tip that I think kind of just ties into making the game more enjoyable in general. Whereas I think exploration will make the game feel less miserable. Now, this might be pretty obvious, as, you know, this game is supposed to be kind of like open world fantasy RPG-esque, third person, first person action RPGs-esque, something in that category. But I'll go as far as to say that I didn't really enjoy this game until I really started getting into the exploration, and that is something that I think is it's not really something that's stressed early on, but I think it's something that is a very important, almost honestly more important than the dodge part, is that exploration will make the game feel less miserable. The story itself doesn't really suck me in that great. I don't think it's that amazing. I'm not paying attention to it too much. But when I get into the side quests and doing everything outside of the main story and kind of exploring and kind of seeing what's around every corner, I do really think it makes it fun. And to boot, this is where you get most of your uniques and you get most of your like rare crafting items and things like that. They're really going to make the game more fun and make you feel more strong as like a fantasy kind of RPG character. Now, I know some people are more story-based, and that's fine. But I think this game really does encourage you to kind of just like escape outside the general mold of the story. It wants you to go out and kind of explore these big, beautiful areas that the developers made. And honestly, I think this game really makes it worth your while to explore. And that isn't something that is a negative. Honestly, it's not something that is really even a positive. I think it's just something that will make the game more enjoyable to anybody that really wants to get into it. If you can get past the first couple hours and kind of explore a little bit and make your character what you want it to be, I think it makes the game a lot more enjoyable than just kind of like following the story and kind of getting your butt kicked. And exploring makes it so you can feel like a stronger person, so to say. So I really think it's a big tip to follow that. For tip number three, and this kind of ties into being someone that explores the game, is I think being a bounty hunter is totally worth it. Now, I'll go as far as to say that as far as I am in the game, so I'm about 16, 17 hours in, almost to 20, I think. I will say in every area I've gone to, I've done the bounties pretty much immediately every time. And really the question of why doing the bounties comes into it, what the conversation immediately is because it introduces you to all these different areas. It usually, in this game, because the enemies don't respawn, these areas with the bounties are usually filled to the brim with enemies of like, I mean, if you played the game, you know. If you haven't, there's all kinds of different types of enemies, but you'll always see the same general type of enemy next to these bounty people. This game's enemy types aren't super varied, but if you go chasing after the bounties, you'll more than likely find these big campments, and with the campments come the idea of items and uniques and all this other stuff that you find. Not to mention, when you go to turn them in, each one pretty much nets you 1,000 gold every time. Not to mention the fact that once you finish all the bounties on a board in an area, you end up getting a unique, which most of the time I think is pretty good. Honestly, most of them have been pretty good. But this kind of ties into my next tip, which is because most of my clips have been me finding bounties, because that's the majority of what I've done is side quests and bounties. I've been kind of skipping through the story, but I want to talk about tip number 4, and you'll see me kind of panic doing this, is that food is disgustingly broken in this game. I'm not talking about just like eating food that restores health. There's so many different aspects in this game that make it feel like the food is meant to be consumed for a more like offensive reason, just than health. Some will give you bonuses like stamina boosting or damage reduction or boosts to damage itself. And honestly, you find so many consumables outside of health potions themselves that I think, in reality, food is, at the end of the day, more useful and gives you better stats and boosts than the health potions that you get right off the rip. This isn't to say that your health potions obviously don't come in use, because, I mean, I'm not even going to lie, I've died a bunch in this game. But through using food that is appropriate for what situation I'm in, I think it really is taking advantage of a game mechanic that makes you feel, or kind of gives you the reins to do what you want to do. Not to mention, every enemy and their mother drops food, so you really have nothing to lose. And most of the time it's passive healing and passive buffs, so once again, food is broken. Tip number 5, and this is more so something as a preference that I think is just good overall, because combat in this game gives you the option to do whatever you want, and that is magic is always a good backup. Now, I'll go as far as to say that I'm a person that kind of adapts their build accordingly. Like, I will change it if I find something I like, and we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit. But the magic in this game, once you get a couple points into your skill system with the mage, feels really strong, and honestly, it really comes out as being one of the stronger sort of subsets in the game, besides just sword wielding, axe wielding, bow wielding, gun wielding. I really do think magic is the best, and even if you don't really main magic, I do think it's beneficial to have magic as a backup at the least, just because it gives you access to this such a great variety of things and, you know, game-changing abilities that, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't hurt to at least have it as a backup, because you are allowed to have 2 sets of, you know, weapons that you can switch just with the click of a button. So, I mean, magic is my backup, and I would go as far as say it's probably the best backup. Number 7. This is don't be scared to invest in other builds. This kind of ties into the magic tip that I just had. And that is the fact that more often than not, you're going to find things that are better than what you have. This game has a really good way of just throwing uniques at you in such a amazing fashion that you might see something that you like. And this clip, which I recorded last night, is a perfect example. I get a 2-handed sword. I had never run a 2-hand sword before. And the idea with this game that is really nice is that you can refund all your abilities, all your ability points for, I want to say, right over 1,000 gold. I think it's 1,200. It might change based on the amount of times you change. So for me, it's 1,200. It might be cheaper for you. But it really ties into the idea that you shouldn't be scared to try other things at the end of the day. This game really does encourage you to kind of like step outside of your comfort zone. Like, if you want to try something, you can switch up your entire build in a couple clicks, and it's not really going to change that much. Sure, you might have to change your playstyle, but at the end of the day, you shouldn't be scared to try and invest in these other builds, because there's so many uniques and there's so many different ways you can approach fights that, I mean, I think it's a really good feature. It wasn't something that I was extremely sold on in the beginning, but I think it's a great feature once it's fully implemented in the later games where you're able to buy and kind of invest what you want. Tip number 8 is kind of easy, and it's honestly something that I think a lot of people wouldn't look over, but you'd be surprised. And that is check every merchant. So most of the time, and I'll say these clips that I posted are just from the first major city that you go into. The first time you see these merchants, it doesn't hurt you to just go in and check what they have. Most of them always usually have at least one unique. And once you get into some of the later areas, they have multiple uniques, which some of them are insanely priced. But you get the gist of what I'm saying. Check every merchant, because you never know what they have. I myself, when I came to the first area, made it a goal to kind of buy everything, every unique I could, even if, you know, I didn't use them. But at the end of the day, the way this game system works is you can upgrade the uniques to get to your level. So I think it's beneficial to visit every merchant and buy every unique just for the point of having it if you ever need it in a build along the way. Sure, they might be pricey sometimes, but gold in this game is pretty easy to come by, and honestly, I don't really see a point in not spending the money just because. And this really ties into my last tip and trick, and that is pick up everything that isn't nailed to the floor. Now, I'll go on a limb and say, in my Skyrim days, I was a klepto. I would steal everything that I could, as long as I wasn't going to get caught. And this game really does encourage you to pick up everything. Not only can you sell it to the merchants and make money to buy these uniques like I talked about in the last trip, or last tip, so to say, but you can also break all these things down to get crafting materials for some of your, you know, your unique upgrades that are really strong later in the game. So that's why I really can't reiterate it enough to pick up everything. There isn't a system in this game where like you're punished for picking stuff up. If something is highlighted with the orange tint, I think it's an orange tint, unless I'm colorblind, of course, then you can pick it up and no one's going to say anything to you. The thing about the NPCs being so kind of like absent is that if something is there, and you see it in a shop and it's orange, pick it up or read it. Do whatever you want to do with it. My favorite thing is pick stuff up in the shop and then sell it back to them, because at the end of the day, what are they going to do? So that this last tip really comes down to pick up everything you can, uniques, rares, everything. If you don't want to sell them, break them down for parts. If you want to sell them at merchants. And at the end of the day, that's all I have. I hope y'all enjoyed this video and subscribe for more. I'm sure there'll be more in the future, but we'll see with Avowed.